Welcome to the Impact Learning Visionaries podcast, where we celebrate the unsung heroes of the learning and development industry. As always, we'll be bringing some laughter and a bit of fun along the way, but more importantly, you'll get some incredible insights, key lessons, and unique perspectives on everything related and possibly unrelated to training and development. Let's get this show on the road. Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of Impact Learning Visionaries, and today we are joined by Jared Kruger, who has over 10 years of experience in the edtech industry, where he's played an integral part in leading teams in the strategic planning, design and implementation of digital learning solutions for a wide range of audiences. He's hugely passionate about delivering learning experiences that are sophisticated, high-touched and well-suited to users' exact needs. Jared follows a user-centric view and approaches problem-solving through ideation and deep learning, and is currently the head of education for Startup School, an online entrepreneurship and business mentorship program making a huge difference in South Africa. Jared, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Jason. Really, really great to be here.
So we don't often get to talk about the startup space when it comes to learning and development, and I think you've got it from both sides. I mean, you're kind of running an ecosystem to help upskill and train entrepreneurs. And when I was thinking about this, for me, the interesting correlation here is that technically every organization is looking for those kind of real flavors of entrepreneurship. Inside the organization, it's called intrapreneurship as opposed to entrepreneurship. But there's a lot of these skills that people are actively seeking in employees and in people joining the organizations. But before we go there, tell me a little bit about Startup School and what you guys are doing there.
Cool, yeah. It's a really interesting story. It goes back to 2017, and Mr. Price, so you guys probably know about the Mr. Price group. The chairman and the founder, Stuart Cohen, was also at the time the chairman of the UCT Graduate School of Business. And he was looking at kind of what's going on in South Africa economically and what could shift the needle substantially in terms of bridging the gap of inequality and also substantially injecting some energy into the economy. And he commissioned a whole bunch of research, and it came out that, and we knew this already, and he knew this too, but that entrepreneurship is a significant answer to the problem. So he wanted to figure out, how do you grow entrepreneurship in the country? And so that's how Startup School the seeds of Startup School started. And the idea was then to try and create something that was really accessible to many people across the board. So somebody who is running a spaza shop all the way through to somebody who's got this idea for a fintech company. How can we impart some entrepreneurial knowledge to these guys quickly? How can we do it easily? And how can we do it relatively cheaply? And then the program was kind of started being built at that stage, and now we have a 12-week online, what we call the Entrepreneurship Development Program, and we've put, I think it's close to 4,000 students through in this many years, and have immense success stories in terms of guys who have managed to get this entrepreneurial energy, this mindset, and some of the basic skills to kind of get going. So yeah, that's the kind of the overarching picture of what it is we do.
So I mean, it's firstly, congratulations. I mean, 4,000 people is not a small or insignificant number, and it sounds like an incredible journey. What I'm quite curious is always fascinated by these journeys that we go on, because we always kind of just head down, blinkers on, just trying to get stuff done. And just kind of stepping back for a moment and thinking about, probably what the last 6-7 years that this has been running, what some of the biggest challenges and obstacles were in getting this program off the ground and keeping it sustaining for so many years.
It's a great question, and the first thing that comes to mind is that the concept of entrepreneurship is largely a very misunderstood concept in South Africa. It's not often seen as an option for most people coming out of school. And so what we realized that there was actually a significant need for advocacy for what it is to start something yourself, what it is to build something for yourself, and to work for yourself. So we realized quickly, yes, there's a huge education element that we need to design and get ready to work with people. But there was this big part of how do we tell people about what entrepreneurship is and how do we attract them to that. And so what we started doing was working on telling the stories of everyday entrepreneurs. So really kind of pushing back and trying to kind of almost stop the Silicon Valley view of what a startup is, what it is to be a business owner, and really get to some of the real stories of the guy who starts, buying biscuits and packaging them and selling them on the street, and how that grows to something more, and how the opportunities start to present themselves when you're open to those opportunities and have some of the basic skill sets. So yeah, that was a big obstacle, and I think it's still a substantial obstacle because entrepreneurship is still actually quite a misunderstood concept, even though in South Africa, the government talks about supporting small businesses. There's a lot of the rhetoric around small business will be the answer to job creation, will be the answer to economic growth. It's still, a lot of it is still talk. There's not a lot of action happening, and so we're finding ourselves need to be putting in the energy and the momentum to move those things forward. And then I think the next thing was to reach many people. We realized that that online learning was going to be the way to go. And I have a background in that, and I come from a space that transitioned from traditional university kind of lectures to putting professors onto an online platform and designing for learning online. And so then we needed to figure out how we were going to make online learning accessible now to people who are new to entrepreneurship. So again, there was another obstacle, and I think what we realized there was that most people are ready for online learning. It's that they often don't really understand what it is that they're going into. So we built quite a lot of support structure around orientating people towards learning online and kind of making it not scary, making it accessible, making it feel quite natural and normal, and something that can fit into a busy life, into a life that's filled with the normal mess of things, And entrepreneurs or people who maybe are in the early stages of starting something are extremely busy. So you needed to build something that was flexible. So I think those two things would I would say stand out as big obstacles, and I'm pretty proud of where we're at in addressing them. But it's a constant struggle, I suppose is the word. But it's a constant need for us to keep doing it and doing it better.
So it's amazing how many kind of similarities there are between what you've said and I think what most kind of learning and development people experience is with online learning. One of the big challenges obviously is to get people to start, which you've talked about, but also get people to see it through to the end. And I think it's one of the big challenges in the industry is that there's such low completion rates with e-learning and online learning, and it sounds like you guys have directly kind of targeted solutions around helping people not only to overcome that first fear of starting, but also to kind of see it through to the end. What type of mechanisms have you put in place to help kind of address that kind of low completion rate issue?
It's a great question, and I think it's also one we constantly are working on, and we do boast very very high completion rates. And I think coming from my background at the company Get Smarter, where there was a strong human support element that always accompanied the online learning offering, that has been the overarching philosophy for me, is that there will always be a human, there with a learner from the beginning to the end, from application stage all the way through to completion. I think the other thing is that's very, very important for us at Startup School is making sure that the person who gets onto the program wants to get onto the program and understands what program they're getting onto. So we have quite a rigorous application process where we expect quite a lot of an applicant to, initially, where they have to kind of go through some technical hoops. So it's a full out an application. Can you write well enough to be understood in the virtual world, and then film yourself and for a minute explaining why you want to do this thing, upload it to YouTube and share that link with us. Now that sounds so simple, but really that simple step of going, we understand you are now digitally savvy. You're native to understanding how this thing works. We've kind of tested you without you knowing that. I suppose. I mean, that sounds devious, but it really is an intentional step in making sure that when you do get accepted, you have the best possible chance of succeeding. So you've come on, you've made an argument for why you want to be on the program, because we offer quite a substantial bursary opportunity through our funders, and we're actually a not-for-profit operation. So they have to motivate for that. And then this sharing of a video, they've gone through some digital sort of tests. And so when they get put onto the orientation module, we know that we've got the best chance of getting this person to the next step. Then we have what we call the boot camp phase, which is the first 2 weeks of our 12-week program. And there's an expectation that is also completed. So it's a first test or first thing to succeed in, and you get kind of, once you get to that stage, you know that you are ready to make it through to the end. And most people who make it through that boot camp will complete the course. So the first 2 weeks are also designed very intentionally around people's mindsets, around goal setting, around accountability, around partnering for accountability. So we really have scaffolded the starting point, so from application through to the end of the boot camp, to set somebody up for success. And I think that's the reason we get quite a nice, quite substantially good, really good results by the end. I think the other thing to add is, because we're a project-based operation, so everybody who comes onto the program works on their own idea or business if it's running, there's a deeply personal connection to what it is they're doing. So they feel like they are working on their business every day. It's not a sense of we're doing a course or I'm being tested on content or theory. I'm applying immediately what I'm learning to my context, to what it is I'm doing right now. And so that relevance, I think, also keeps people going, because they're seeing the difference in their operation each day. I think that would be the three sort of main things for us in retention and completion rates.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I like the bootcamp idea because it's also a small win, and we know the effect that has on the brain and kind of just that motivational kind of aspect to it. So that's great. Other thing I'm quite curious about is we talked about the biggest obstacles, but I want to almost kind of look at the other side of the coin and understand, if you look back over the past 6-7 years, what are the things you're banking as big wins? What has been the kind of like aha moments, or the holy shit moments, we didn't see that coming, that was amazing. What are those?
There's been a couple here. I think I would be very tempted to pull out these, specific stories of success. And I mean, we had, there's just so many of those. But I think there's a couple of things that have shown, for me, have been really important in Startup School's journey. And the one is that at the end of each program, we have 100,000 Rand grant funding available for, the best pitch. But what's been really interesting in seeing 7 years of grant funding being given, and we've run on average 3 presentations a year, so that's 300,000 Rand a year that we give in grant funding away, is the impact that grant funding has on startups versus investment or loans, and the success rate of that funding. And it's something that we're piecing together now and seeing the value of startups in South Africa getting the opportunity to get money injected into their business with very few strings attached. And I mean that because investors or angel investors and various investment kind of operations and early stage startups in South Africa are quite often not compatible. There's a disconnect almost off the bat, and we see a lot of heartache and failure for both parties. So the grant funding definitely has been a huge aha moment, and it's something that we're pushing really hard for moving forward. In fact, last year we ran our inaugural, it was the first one of once a year running a competition or an application for grant funding of up to R1 million. And that has, we gave, there was 3 businesses that came through that, of about 100 that got to apply. So if you're an alumni of startup school, you get this opportunity to apply for funding on a yearly basis. As I say, started last year, and we definitely be doing it again this year. We've secured the funding for that. And so I'm super excited to see the impact that we're having there. I think the other aha moment is that the kind of profile of people coming to the course has been not by design in any way, but very naturally falling into the demographics of South Africa and the representational element of South Africa. And that's been really great. And we don't do a lot of marketing for a call for applications. It's largely word of mouth now because of people, the number of people we've put through the program. And I think that's also a testament to our throughput, is that people are coming to us having heard about what the experience is, or having connected with somebody who's benefited immediately. I think that's where those are 2 substantial wins for me. I guess the other thing is and this is through no design of our own, is actually seeing South Africans getting better at online learning. And I think COVID perhaps had something to do with it, but there's definitely been a momentum in people really getting what this thing is, and we're not having to work as hard to orientate people towards a virtual space for learning. And I think that's fantastic. It's nice to see that change, even though it's still got a long way to go.
Yeah. I mean that's really amazing. I mean it's a really interesting insight on grant funding versus investments, and having been the recipient of investment many years ago in South Africa, I can relate. I guess I'm one of the lucky ones because I think I found a great angel investor. The US investor was great as well. Actually, I had no complaints on either side, so I think I just got very lucky. But I guess that's not the case for many people. So final question, just around the kind of startup schools is in the bio we talked about this kind of like in your bio this user-centric view of designing programs and designing solutions, and as a kind of design thinker and someone who's spent a lot of time in that space, I'm always fascinated to find out from people how they've implemented or how they've gone about doing the user-centric approach to designing their experiences and their kind of learning journeys. You kind of maybe take us back a little bit to your journey around that and where that user-centric, I mean, it never goes away. I get that. You're always kind of getting feedback, and it's kind of constantly getting, refining. But how are you guys implementing user-centric design into your processes?
I think so. There's quite a long answer to that shorter question. I think to start off with, we knew that the MBA version or the business schools of the world are not getting it right for the majority of entrepreneurs or entrepreneurial people. And that it's very specific for a certain group, of individuals who have the luxury of time and obviously the luxury of funding. And so immediately we wanted to go in and kind of flip what business schools, kind of approach to teaching and learning was about, and more specifically around how they design programs. And so we knew that what needed to happen was something that was extremely adaptable to different users. So somebody who is coming in, perhaps not even having finished school, who is entrepreneurial to the core, but is not necessarily in any way academically, strong. And then that person who has finished a computer science, honors, who's now wanting to start something, is extremely technical, extremely knowledgeable, has academic experience, can write. How do you take these two users and put them through a program, the same program, where they're going to benefit substantially and move forward for themselves to become successful economically, become economic participants, and really work, make sustainable business happen. And so we then, that's the check, is always in the room. If you've got these two guys and you give them what we've made for them, what happens? And I think that the great thing with the way that we run the program, with our coaches being integral parts of the journey for each user, is that we're constantly getting that feedback as to how people are responding to resources, to the activities, and how and whether it's working or not. And I think we've managed to refine over the years a program that really is that adaptable, that if I can approach it and I will get maximum benefit from this, this regardless of where I'm sitting on my entrepreneurial journey, also on my academic kind of background or situation. And that's always it's something to be proud of, but it's something that you need to constantly keep checking. And it's about that the projects that they're working on, or the exercises that they're working on. What is coming back to the coach at the end of the week, and is it shifting the needle, and is there benefit benefit to the individual? The other great thing about the program is you do this application at the beginning, is this 1 minute pitch of who you are and why you want to do this, and right at the end you do another pitch of your business. So there's this really great before and after shot. So we're also constantly able to, this is one example of when we're surveying these guys all the time. We are constantly checking whether resources are being used, asking people to rate resources, all that jazz. But we really can look at the whole and see whether the majority of our individuals are shifting the needle, are making massive steps, or growing substantially from the beginning to the end. And then I suppose the other thing is really knowing the users. And that also comes with a rigorous application process, is that we get to know this individual from this part of South Africa or Africa with this kind of education, with this kind of experience. And so at any one stage, we can take a view of how the program is doing for various users. And that's extremely powerful, because if you're not able to quickly, and this is the joy of virtual and joy of designing something that, like, in the online space, is that you have the power of analytics, and you need to make sure you're using those. And that is, I love that part of particularly of the online learning and learning and design, or learning and development, is the ability to respond to information that is constantly being made for you and constantly in sight. I think there's too often, having come from a background of education, there's even in the old sort of sense of the school classroom, there's very seldom a constant measure of how people are doing. It's a test, of some kind, and that's how we decide whether there's a success or not. Whereas for us in the online spaces, you can test sentiment, you can test emotional well-being, you can check in. There's constantly the sense of how are we doing? How far have we come? How far do we need to go? Yeah, I think that's where we're at in terms of user centricness. Yeah.
So I picked up so many different things there that I think are things that like all people who are designing learning solutions should be taking. Really, they should be taking notes. You know, everything from just not doing something yourself and having someone to kind of guide you, make you accountable, to really understanding the people who are going through this learning journey, and kind of getting that sense of understanding and ownership, checking in, measuring. I mean, it's like, you know, all of these things I sometimes think are kind of difficult. They take time and effort, are often forgotten because of the fact that when people are designing learning journeys, they're often under pressure. There's lots of things happening, but I think you've given us a lot of great examples of the things that need to be in place to make something successful and sustainable. So now, as Bugs Bunny always used to say, I'd like to take a left turn at Albuquerque and ask something completely different. And that is, I think so many people are fascinated about entrepreneurship and what makes someone a good entrepreneur. Can you teach entrepreneurship? And here we have you right at the heart of teaching people entrepreneurship. So I'm throwing it all out there and I'm asking you a very broad, bold question is what is your take on entrepreneurship? Is it something that people just have a natural affinity towards? Is it something that can be taught? What is the secret sauce of entrepreneurship? Like, what makes a good versus bad entrepreneur?
Sure, it's a very, very big question, and I think it's one let me start off by saying I actually hate the word entrepreneur. I think it's problematic. It's got a sexiness that's attached to it that I don't think should be there. So that's my that's my launch, where I launch from. So at the heart of entrepreneurship or doing, creating something for yourself is an embracing of creativity. And this is where I think, so my question is always, can creativity be taught? And I really, really do believe that this is something that can be nurtured and taught to those that don't necessarily feel like they are creative, or maybe are not necessarily creative. And I'm not talking about being able to do art or whatever, but I'm talking about the art or the process of thinking differently, thinking in alternative ways, finding solutions, all that stuff that comes with with that word. So for me, I view entrepreneurship as a seriously creative endeavor, and then I believe that creativity can be taught, and creativity can be taught in different ways. There are technical ways you can teach it, for critical thinking and problem solving and all that kind of stuff, and then there's this inspirational, motivational element of it. Can you inspire? Can you be inspired? Can you be moved to see things differently? Can you be transformed in some way by seeing something, by doing something, by experiencing something? And I believe that all of us can, and we regularly do. Whether it's reading a book, watching a movie or a TV series, or viewing a painting, or even looking at comics, whatever that might be, and that's a deeply human thing. And so, going forward on that, I believe that entrepreneurship is very human. And I think more people could access it, and spend more time developing themselves towards it. I think the technical side of business, and I'm going to say something that's also would upset the MBAs, is that business in itself is not rocket science. The principles of business are not that complex. It's the creativity around that stuff that is difficult to access. And so if that stuff can be supported in the likes of schools and in families and in society more broadly, I think we would have more people readily going into entrepreneurship, and then accessing the content that they need, the business skills, the technicalities of what it is to run a business. And then I think the other thing is there's a legacy in South Africa of kind of working for somebody and climbing a corporate ladder and existing like that, which is, the world is breaking away in many ways from that, but our school system is still holding that pattern, that you go and work for somebody. And I'm not saying that that's necessarily the wrong thing, but I think there should certainly be more awareness of the fact that creating something for yourself is absolutely an opportunity, is absolutely a choice that you can make, and that even if you end up going into working for somebody, those skills or that way of thinking, that mindset of creativity will only benefit you, moving forward. So I guess, I don't know whether I rambled too much there or whether I gave you somewhat of an answer.
You did open the door to something very interesting, and I want to take you back to, I think a lot of people understand the problem solving, understand the critical thinking, and even to a degree understand the creativity. But you mentioned along the way this kind of sense of having a mindset that's open to inspiration, open to awe, open to almost a sense of curiosity. How do you kind of instill that in people? If someone comes to you, and they're, I'm at the risk of basically annoying everybody in this industry. They've come from like an accounting degree or something, and their whole world is just numbers, and they're kind of something in their kind of the back of their mind is saying, kind of like this entrepreneur thing is sounding intriguing. But how do you do almost like a mindset shift with people on this course, just to kind of get them to have that sense of wonder, that sense of being curious about the world around them, looking for things, like challenging the status quo almost?
Mm-hmm. So there are a couple of things I would say here. So within the course itself is a very simply an analysis or a deep dive into who you are, your strengths, and a SWOT analysis really, but a guided SWOT analysis of yourself, and really interrogating as much as possible what these different parts are. And often when you start to try and get to your strengths, your weaknesses, your sticking points, you start to realize some of the stuff that you haven't tapped into, or that you're saying you have a strength, but actually, when last did I really, kind of pursue that? So that on the one hand, it's about deep analysis of your own mindset and kind of unpacking that. I think the other thing, and I come from a quite a creative sort of space. I'm deeply involved in the arts world. There's this great story that goes, this mother who teaches art, his daughter says, where are you going? And she says, I'm going to work. And she says, well, what do you do? I teach adults to draw and paint. And the kid says, well, what do you mean they forgot? And I think that there's a lot of stuff in our past in growing up where we shut down some of that creativity, we shut down that playfulness, we shut down the opportunities to see things just differently for these paths and choices that are quite straight and narrow. And I think if we can realize that we had those, we definitely had those, and they're still there, they're still with us. Let's just let them live a little bit, let them come out. And it's as I say, it's not as simple as now you go and start painting or go and start dancing or whatever, but open yourself to the fact that you are a deeply creative and inquisitive person. And I think when you let that happen, then it can actually happen. So in the program, our coaches are quite well versed at asking the right questions, at getting somebody to really interrogate their choices or their answers. And this is across the whole program. But right at the beginning, it's around mindset. It's around that personal, who are you, and what are these things that you're not yet tapping into? What are these things that you haven't yet explored and will let happen? let them come out.
So I'm just curious, like, when you're going through that journey as an entrepreneur or a student, what are some of the symptoms look like that kind of give you a sense that you're starting to bridge that divide and it's starting to happen?
In terms of actual
terms like what do you see in terms of approaches, behaviors? Like how can you, as the person undertaking this very personal journey, start to see signs that actually it's working?
2 words: joy and despair.
Okay.
Why I say both is there's absolute joy in finding some things, and you can feel that it's a visceral thing in people, and you can see it in their writing, you can see it in the way that they are. And despair is also is the other thing, is when people go, oh, I'm not that, or I wish for that to be different. And both those feelings are indicators of a deeper interrogation and a potential shift. I think the other thing is, which are linked to both joy and to despair, is when the fear starts to subside slightly on mistake making. And I'm not saying fear is a very healthy, it is a very healthy thing, and one hopes that there is, particularly when you're dealing with people or other people's money, that you do have a degree of fear. But when you see people's fears start to diminish a little bit, and then the fear of making mistakes kind of going away a little bit, that's when you're moving towards this sense of creativity and being able to see options, opportunities, those kinds of things. We talk about about mistake making a lot in the program, and I think that's also a critical part or critical aspect of entrepreneurship is an embracing of mistakes and kind of a celebration of mistakes, and I think that's a very challenging thing for most of us to encounter. But when we see there's slightly more comfort with mistake making, then I think we're moving in the right direction.
Yeah, I mean, and I guess we go back to the school system again, where every single mistake you make in a school system today is punished, in terms of marks, grades, feedback.
Yeah.
So you're kind of pummeled for 12 years of your life, 13 years, to fear mistakes. So yeah, it's a big challenge, and I guess it's always this kind of big question mark I've had in my head is how because I've been lucky throughout my career to be involved in both successful businesses and failed businesses, and I learned only through those failed businesses that failure isn't the end of the world. But I consciously and viscerally remember going through those businesses while they were going through failure and thinking my world had come to an end, and then afterwards coming out the other side and going, well, actually that's maybe not so bad. It's like it's led to something new. The challenge for me is always without people having to go through that. You talked about this kind of sense of despair. If it's even possible to kind of get that mindset shift, or if people really actually just need to fail at something, recover, and realize actually failure is not so bad. I don't know, do you think it's possible? Because I've always kind of debated whether that is the case.
I don't know. First of all, I don't think there are too many entrepreneurs in the world that are successful entrepreneurs who haven't had substantial failures in their careers. So it's pretty unavoidable. and it's how does one learn from that? But I think the joy of something like Startup School as well, and the program, is that there is a safer space in which you can test your ideas and test stuff. And that goes to design thinking, as well. We definitely, design thinking is a strong component of what's part of the actual program, is making mistakes in a safer place. And I think there is opportunity for that more often than we realize. That you can push things and test things while holding a certain amount of safety around those things. And I think the more the entrepreneurial spirit grows, the more opportunities there will be for that kind of testing and that kind of mistake making. And I mean, we always say to our guys, I would be very surprised in 5 years from you finishing the program that if you are still doing the business idea in the same way that you're working on it right now. It would be very surprising. And they often take that, it's well, then you go through some stories of entrepreneurs and from our founder, even, Stuart Cohen of Mr. Price, who went bankrupt 4 or 5 times before Mr. Price, ultimately was successful. There's beautiful stories that are out there that we need to hear and we need to share more, not just the Elon Musks and the Zuckerberg, rhetoric that we get. And so learn from other people's mistakes, find opportunities to make mistakes in a safe way, but then also get comfortable with making them in a not safe way. And I know that's really challenging. It's not always easy. And I think particularly in the context of many South Africans where there is no safety net, there is just this, survival entrepreneurship is one of the words, that's used a lot in South Africa. It's incredibly challenging to say to somebody like that, play, make mistakes. It's obviously, and so we do need to be careful. And I think the startup schools program or the process that one goes through definitely allows for you to make the mistakes with your coach, and then you could you can go and test it. But despair is part of the game, and I think it's kind of unavoidable. And again, like I mentioned, when I say joy and despair, these are two things that are you should be experiencing both of these. It's deeply human, but it's also definitely what entrepreneurship is about.
I was going to say, it sounds like the story of my life. But I think, just reflecting on this conversation is there are so many similarities to, I think, irrespective of whether you're an entrepreneur or not. I think we all go through, even if we decide to go into the working world, all of the same rules and challenges and I suppose mindsets apply. And I think, especially what you said at the end, I think is great advice for anybody, actually, whether they want to be an entrepreneur or whether they're starting out in their career. It's understand that failure is inevitable, and there are ways to fail in a kind of measured and contained way, and then there's ways to fail in a spectacular way. And as someone who's done both, I would say it's always preferable to fail in smaller increments than to go for the big swing and miss. Yeah. But I think closing out, I think there's just one final question I have for you is I guess, as we've talked about failure and trying to kind of not be overwhelmed and consumed by this fear of failure and the sense of despair. But if you were sitting across from someone who's just about to enter into the workplace, or someone who's kind of finished university and is thinking of, should I, shouldn't I? What's the one piece of advice that you would give to someone to say, think about this if you want to become an entrepreneur? Like, what's that kind of hard truth that you would want them to really deeply think about before they made a decision to go down this route?
Sure, it's an incredibly challenging question, and why I say that is because what I would want to say is go and play as much as possible. Go and be, go crazy. But I also know that is it can be foolish advice. It doesn't always lead to the you finding the right thing. It could be a absolute disaster. So it very much depends on the kind of person that I'd be speaking to. But I do feel that there's this duality to the advice I'd want to give, is that there is immense freedom in the world and opportunities to do incredible things, fun things, important things that will, that could answer some major problems. But on the other hand, there's a deep responsibility that us as humans have to address some of the really awful things that we're experiencing, from the environmental stuff to geopolitical stuff, and we don't have to go into that. And I think that if you are a human now in this world, you need to take some cognizance of that responsibility. So there's a duality here. I do believe people need to play. People need to find joy. People need to go and experiment. They need to kind of go crazy, but they also need to acknowledge their humanness and the world in which they exist. And if you can hold that complexity constantly, and obviously it's a juggling act. That would be what I would say to somebody is, hold in both hands this responsibility and this great freedom and playfulness that we have as people, and see where that goes. Yeah.
Great advice. Yeah, I mean, it is very difficult to kind of have that sense of abductive thinking where you're holding two almost diametrically opposed ideas. But if you can do that for long enough, then the magic always seems to unfold. Closing out then, we always ask our guests to share with us a book, podcast, experience, anything that they've kind of had in the recent past that's kind of created a sense of joy, awesomeness, aha moment.
Sure, there's a couple of things. So I think I have spent quite a lot of time in the last little while trying properly to understand global politics, but from an economic perspective. And a book that has really shifted my thinking is Joseph Stiglitz's The Price of Inequality. And it's both devastating and extremely exciting, and given me quite a lot to think about in terms of how we are to imagine a different future, potentially within a shift in what we think in terms of capitalism, in terms of geopolitics, in terms of inequality, and kind of eradication of poverty, all these things. But he writes extremely succinctly, and has this ability to really make these incremental shifts in your minds. By the time you've finished reading it, you really are feeling overwhelmed as well as empowered to kind of try and do something different. So yeah, definitely Stiglitz is a current flavor for me.
Wow, sounds like a great book for two reasons. One is obviously for the content, but I love that idea that you said about how it kind of was almost galvanized you and taken you on this journey. And there's a lot to be unpacked there about how he does that. So definitely, yeah, sounds amazing. Jared, sadly we've come to the end. I think this space of entrepreneurship, what you guys are doing at startup schools, and just we even touched on something quite significant and profound at the end is a big passion of mine, is understanding that what we're doing is not just for us now, it's for the future of ourselves, our species, our kids, our families. And the things that we're building, we should be taking this mindset of building something that's going to make a difference and have a purpose, where I feel that a lot of that has been lost. But I want to say thank you. It's been an incredible conversation, and I've loved every minute of it. So thank you for joining us.
Oh, thanks so much, Jason. I really appreciate it.
Hey, thanks so much for joining us for this episode of Impact Learning Visionaries. If you found it interesting or helpful, please subscribe. by clicking on the button down below so you don't miss our next one. Also, be sure to check out our Reality Bites blog for more information on how technology is aiding in learning development. Links are all in the description below. Go check it out. Thanks a lot. Bye.